Ladies and gentlemen, there's something about a plan coming together, especially when the plan wasn't even the plan. It wasn't something that you foresaw. It wasn't something that you could ever have hoped to put together yourself. But I think for a lot of us, a lot of South Africans, and I sort of want to take just 2 seconds to very quickly talk about this. I posted this on X as well earlier today, where I tried to make the point that one of the things in South Africa that is really annoying is that whenever we talk about cultural wars, right? So we talk about the war in culture, it so often boils down to race, right? White versus black. And it's not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely right. Because at the core, at the foundation of these problems in South Africa lies two fundamentally different cultures. On the one side, you have a culture that believes in freedom, believes in the autonomy of the individual, and that the individual is the most important minority in any society. It is a culture that believes in capitalism, that believes in leaving people alone and allowing them to not only determine their future, but also take responsibility, sole responsibility, for the outcome and the situation that they find themselves in. On the other side, you have a culture that believes in collective punishment. It believes in collective action. It believes in communism. It doesn't regard the individual as in any way important. It believes in victimhood politics and grievance politics at its core. These are the two cultures. And there is plenty of racial diversity between these two cultures. So oftentimes when we talk about Afrikaners and the problems that Afrikaners have in this country, it's important to remember that we're not just talking about Afrikaners in the true sense of the word, people who are white and people who speak Afrikaans, but we're also talking about Afrikaners under a much broader umbrella, people who subscribe to this culture that built the greatest empires the world has ever seen, this culture that has allowed for human flourishing for at least the last 250 years, versus the culture that in its short period or short history on this earth has killed over 100 million people in Russia, China, Cambodia, and Uganda, and many more in countries that we still don't even know the death toll of because, well, those governments won't be really forthcoming about those numbers, but Venezuela, Cuba, and the like. That's the two cultures that we're talking about here. And as I said, it's not entirely racial. But what we're talking about right now is the unraveling of the culture, the dominant one at the moment, which is the communists, and how their narrative in South Africa is starting to crumble. About 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump announces that he and none of the members of the United States government will be attending the G20 in South Africa. This was a historic G20. It was the first time that the G20 would be held on African soil. South Africa, largely a ceremonial inclusion in the G20 because the G20 is meant to be the largest and most important countries in the world coming together, their leaders, to decide nonsense effectively. And for the most part, it should just be mentioned right off the bat, the G20 is largely useless. It's sort of like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court and NATO. They're mostly useless. They're mostly nowadays used as tools to try and push WEF and Chinese propaganda throughout the world. But at its core, it's still an event. And it's an event that South Africa has taken great pains to get ready for. In fact, we got so ready for it that people started to notice that, hey, hold up, Ramaphosa, what the hell is going on here? Like, you guys have done nothing to do anything. And now suddenly that you're hosting the G20, you guys are in action, cleaning up the streets, fixing the potholes. What the hell is going on? And Ramaphosa decided to answer that question.
Rather than pontificate and say, no, you're doing this because visitors are coming. And of course, when in any household, when visitors come, they do a cleaning up.
Yeah.
They clean up. Similarly, we can do the same even now. So I want you to join me one day to go and clean up one of the streets along which the visitors are going to travel. You and I, so that we make it look better.
Si no le ayuda a la fábrica, el camión le está.
Sorry, I just, yeah, the meme. I love South Africans. We find a way to make everything humorous, which is our way, which is great. But the goal of this man to stand there and say, of course, when visitors come, you clean up. Yeah, but also most of us don't allow our homes to just completely fall into disrepair and then only clean when the visitors arrive. We keep the house clean because, well, we want to live there. And then actually saying, hey, you guys should help us clean up, actually. We pay taxes, bro. Like, that's the whole point of taxes. We pay you so that we don't have to clean. If we're the ones having to clean, why the hell are we paying you taxes? What's the point then of those taxes? But anyways, so South Africa, you know, we're doing this whole rigmarole and fixing the country, and we're gonna show the world. Donald Trump goes, nah, I'm not gonna come. And of course, the South African government does what the South African government does best. It thumps its chest and goes, we don't care about you. Get the hell out of here. Who cares about America? We'll do it with all the other G19 countries. We're good. Well, then Javier Milei says, I'm not coming either. We good. Thank you. I'll just stay in Argentina and fix my own country. I don't need help breaking a country. I've already been through that. And we're like, screw him. We can do it with 18. The G18. Let's go. And Mexico's president says, we're also not coming. We don't really see the point. We have our own problems. We don't need help from you on how to create even newer problems. G17. Let's do this. Yay. Yay. And then China announces that, oh, by the way, Xi Jinping also not interested in coming. Couldn't care less. Now we're down to 16. We're the G16 now. Now, to be fair, it's only Trump that said no one is coming. The other countries did send, some of them sent ministers. Others said, well, we'll send the deputy minister or the deputy president. Actually, I don't think any of them sent the deputy president. They all just sent like ministers of some kind of trade and foreign relations, something or the other. The problem here, of course, is that almost all of these leaders have always attended all of the G20s. The only exception was during COVID, where some of them didn't go to these events. But prior to that, the only leader that has always been missing was Vladimir Putin since 2021 with the invasion of Ukraine. So it marks a significant problem for the communist ANC in South Africa that their first G20 ever also happens to be the one G20 that a lot of the ministers that are from some of the more important countries, not all of them, but I mean, China and America not showing up, that's a real big slight against the South African government. Now, it should be mentioned here, just very quickly, that I don't think this is just about the failures of the ANC, although I do think there is a lot to that. Most of these countries, China included, don't take South Africa seriously. South Africa was never meant to be in the G20. South Africa is a ceremonial inclusion thanks to Nelson Mandela. South Africa's economy is on a downward spiral and has been for 15 years. South Africa's economy has not and will not run with the big dogs as long as the ANC is in charge. The country is doing worse every single year, and right now South Africa is at a point where it mostly relies on handouts from the rest of the world in order to get anything done. So effectively, Cyril Ramaphosa is a glorified hooker when he goes around the world and basically begs for money from every other country for this green energy project or that green energy project, because without it, well, we just don't have the money to make anything really swing. And I'm sure most of the countries know that half of what they give us will just go missing as it gets redistributed to some or other cadre. But effectively, you know, this has reached the point of some trouble for Cyril Ramaphosa, because Cyril came out and said boycott politics doesn't work in response to Donald Trump saying, yeah, we're not going to come. Except boycott politics worked pretty well for Cyril Ramaphosa during apartheid, because it was the boycotts that ultimately managed to destroy apartheid. And he was advocating around the world for every country to boycott South Africa. Not to mention, just a couple of months ago, this man was still boycotting Israel. I think they're still doing it. So clearly, boycott politics do work, at least as far as he's concerned. The reason he's speaking about it now is, again, this whole communist thing. Communists can never admit when they're wrong. They can never backtrack on their decisions. And so there's just a doubling down. He's saying it doesn't work because he wants the world to think that it doesn't bother him. But I promise you that this does. For communists, the one thing that they can't stand is the world thinking them weak. They don't want the world to see the failures of South Africa. That is why they've spent obscene amounts of money. And I guarantee you in the next few months or next few years, really, we're going to find out just how much money was wasted in Johannesburg in order to try and fix that city. How much money was stolen and how many cadres got very rich as a result of the fixing of Johannesburg. That's going to come out, right? That's going to come out. It's why they're taking down AfriForum posters. It's why they're desperately trying to control the narrative. And you can see they're trying to control the narrative just by going through X. If you're on X, you have so many people right now out and about posting everything and anything they can to try and shut up the Afrikaner people. And of course, it's not just the Afrikaner people. There's plenty of black people that are also saying, hey, who gives a crap about any of this stuff? But you have Black Lily here, for example. Remember how happy the Pinkies were when Winnie Mandela died? That's when I knew that she was right. We should have taken them to the sea. Just casual calls for genocide. You have the former Clever Black that posts, white skin is a currency that opens all doors. Anywhere you go in the world, you're treated with dignity. You're given an opportunity to be judged on the merits of your character. No, former Clever Black. That's not what it is. Because as I said here, Thomas Sowell is respected throughout the world. Charlize Theron isn't. Both of them are different skin colors. In fact, Thomas Sowell is the exact color that you say doesn't buy you any credibility. It's all to do with who you are and what you do. The problem is that you don't do anything, and yet you expect to be treated like a king. That every single idea that comes out of you must be worshipped, and we must smell your farts and go, ooh, I love the aroma. No, you either do things well and people have respect for what you do, or you don't, and people say, hey, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Here you have the ANC desperately trying to change the narrative, saying during apartheid, again, using apartheid because that always hits to the heart of the problem. Hundreds of race laws existed. Well, actually not hundreds. It was, I think, during apartheid, it was 100 and something. I can't even remember off the top of my head. After 1994, and it should be mentioned that the vast majority of the race laws that existed in South Africa during apartheid were actually to protect the Bantustans and the Bantu homelands from interference of Western forces. That's something that most black people don't know because they have an ANC approved education. Actually, it's not just black people, it's most lefties in South Africa don't even know that the vast majority of laws in this country that was ever passed during apartheid was to protect the black homelands from interference with Eastern or European powers. But anyways, after 1994, all discriminatory laws were repealed. Just an outright lie. Like, you can literally check that. Today, South Africa, you still have laws on the books right now that date back to like the 1960s and 70s. Today, South Africa legal framework is non-racial and equality focused. That's a beautiful word because the last word actually negates everything that came before it. Equality focused means that we're not busy passing race laws here. When we say that white people can't be more than 4% of a company, that's not a racial law. You guys are misunderstanding. That's a redress law. That's based on equality. It's a race law, but you call it something else, and therefore now it is this something else. The ANC has been doing this to hell and back, by the way. You have Lesotho basically touting this. You have Fikile Mbulula touting this. You have Cyril Ramaphosa touting this. You have every single black cadre Twitter poster or X poster touting this nonsense everywhere. You can tell the ANC gave their instructions to their little fighters. Let's go. We have to defend the country. Even News 24 got in on the action. Adrian Basson comes out with another groundbreaking article saying, well, actually a podcast this time, where he names and shames the people who he calls collaborators of Donald Trump and people who are the enemies of South Africa. Of course, at the core of all of this is a country, a movement, a revolution that is busy dying. The narrative no longer holds. The center is starting to crumble because as much as the ANC tries to double down, as much as the ANC tries to double down on their messaging, the messaging just doesn't stick. We do have a problem, however, in this country, and that is that even if the ANC were to collapse, the EFF and the MK would just take over as the second and third biggest parties because the voters of the ANC are hardline communists. They have not yet tasted the pain of communism, and therefore they still believe. They just believe that either you're not doing it fast enough or you need your leaders to steal a little bit more before we can actually get anywhere. But so that's a different discussion of how we actually get out of this mess. Fundamentally, this is where we are. The movement is starting to crumble. The ANC's messaging is no longer sticking. In the past, they could just say apartheid and everyone would just sort of go along with it. Now we're seeing world leaders sort of go, well, don't care about this. And it should just be finally mentioned. When we talk about this, the leaders aren't just leaving because of South Africa, although South Africa has a big role to play in this because no one has respect for South Africa as a country anymore. But the leaders are mostly not coming because I think after Donald Trump hit the White House, people started to realize very quickly that actually none of these international organizations really matter, right? We have the World Trade Organization, but when America says, well, we just don't care anymore about free trade, we want trade that is equal and just, the World Trade Organization could do nothing but say, okay, cool. The United Nations, when a country wants to go to war, it'll go to war, and it doesn't matter what the NATO or the United Nations or the criminal courts have to say about it. So people are starting to realize that most of these international bodies are nothing more than optics. It's semantics. It's the leaders going for a bit of a holiday. That's about it. And a lot of these leaders, I think, just go, look, we have problems in our own countries. There's no point in us wasting our time in Johannesburg, of all places, to go and, drink some beer. We can drink beer at home. It's funny. I love it. It's great. It is. Let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about South Africa losing so many heads of state. If it was just Donald Trump, you could say, okay, never mind. But it is not just Donald Trump. So let me know. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members. If you want to become a patron, link in the description down below, or join button right below this video. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you like what I do and you want more people to see it, share this video around with as many people as possible. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.